Hey there guys, so thank you for joining me today. I did hope to come to you live. Unfortunately, you all know what happens, life gets in the way. So unfortunately, I'm not able to come to you live today on World Card Making Day. So I've made this pre-recorded video for you. So the card that we are going to be making today is this one. So I do hope that you enjoy following along with my tutorial and making it with me. So thank you for joining me, and I will go straight over to the table and we will begin the tutorial. Thank you. Hey there, so welcome to my tutorial for World Card Making Day. So we are going to be making this card today. Now I have done it on I've just mounted it on card. I actually did this as a sample for one of my new releases a few months ago. However, obviously the size that I've made it, this can be mounted when it's finished. This can be mounted onto a 6x6 card blank, or even 5.5 by 5.5. So the black is cut to 5.5 by 5.5. So it will fit on a 5.5 by 5.5 card. You could also mount on a 6x6 card, and then that would give you an edge around the outside. It would give you a border. So even though I've not actually put it onto a card blank, obviously you can do so. You could also convert this and do it on a larger scale and maybe do it in a journal. So it's a kind of two for one. You can do either. So we're using very few supplies for this. We're not going to be using lots of stuff. So I'm going to put that to one side. I have my Distress Oxide inks. Now you can use any inks that you have. I am using Mermaid Lagoon and I'm using Peacock Feathers. Now I'm using 2 shades of brown and that 2 shades of blue, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want that contrasting colour. So I want the contrasting colour between the oranges that I've got and the blues in the background. Of course you can change that up and you can do it any colours you like. You don't have to use the oxide inks. I'm using oxides. I am going to spritz some water over the top to get that kind of look. However, you can do that as well with normal Distress Oxides. You can do it with other inks as well, and just roll it off with a paper towel. So use what you've got. If you've not got these 2 colours, use 2 different shades of blue. It will work perfectly, or use different colours, maybe 2 shades of purple, as long as they're a contrast to your flowers. So whatever way you do it, as long as they're a contrast to your flowers, it's going to work. So we're going to be using those. I've also got some Paperartsy paints. So the 2 main colours that I'm using are Persimmon and Firebird. So these were new release paints from me a few months ago now. I think, I want to say not July release, I want to say May release. So these were 2 brand new colours. They are translucent colours. For what we're doing today, this does not matter. You don't have to worry whether you've got translucents, semi-opaque or opaque colours. Anything is going to work. Just remember, make sure that they're a contrast colour to your oxides. I've also got some gold in there. Now the only reason I've got the gold in there, on my original I did some gold splatter. So at the end I did some gold splatter over the top. You don't need to do that. It is not essential. If you haven't got the gold or you don't want to do the splatter, you don't have to do it. You can keep it nice and clean and tidy. So if you haven't got that, don't panic. You do need a couple of sponges. Now I'm using the Tim Holtz blender sponges. Obviously you can use normal sponges, use what you've got, and a paintbrush. Okay, so that's what we need to start. I'm going to take my first piece of card. So this is my 5x5 piece of cardstock, white cardstock, and I'm going to be using my Stencil PS254, which is the hexagons stencil. Now I'm going to lay this down over the top. Of course you can secure this if you prefer. Now you can use any part of the stencil, you can move it around. It's big enough that you can use any part of the stencil. Now obviously if you want to secure it you can. I'm not going to. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hold it in place. And what I'm going to do, I want to do a little bit of a gradient with the colours. So I've got my inks at the ready. So So let's put those to one side so that I've got them there, and I've got my blenders ready to go. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to hold it in place. You don't have to, of course. You can, let's do it there. You can tape it down if you prefer, but I prefer to hold it because then I can get right to the very edges. So I'm going to start with my darkest colour. I'm going to get my sponge in there, get some colours going on. Now I'm making sure that I'm holding the stencil and the paper in place, the cardstock in place that's underneath, because otherwise obviously something is going to move around at some point. So all I'm going to do, circular motion, I am going to start blending that colour out. It is nice and rich. My pads are actually quite new, so they are quite rich in colour, but it doesn't matter if they're not, don't panic. And then I'm going to go in, I'm just going to move my hand so I'm holding this part. And I'm going to go in with my other colour, which is peacock feathers. And I'm just going over where that join is, because that will just blend those colours together so that we get a nice blend going on. It's a very quick and easy technique to get some colour down. Now, I don't usually use Distress Oxides if I am going to be putting a lot of paint and stuff on top, only because they are water reactive. And of course, being water reactive, what is going to happen if you try to put something else on top, it's going to react with it. So, you know, that's why I don't do that. So that's fine. Quite happy with that. I'm going to put my pads away because obviously I don't want those to dry up. My stenciling is not perfect. My stenciling is very rarely perfect. But do you know what? It doesn't matter. You know, we are going to be chucking some, we're going to chuck some water on this as well anyway. You can always flip it around. So if you've got a particularly bad area and you decide, you know, you want to cover it up with your stenciling, you could flip it around so your flowers could be on this corner. You know, your flowers could be on the top corner. You can literally do it any way you like. So I certainly do not stress. So what I'm going to do, just going to take my spritz bottle. I'm going to spritz from a distance. I'm also going to spritz some onto my hand. And I'm just going to throw it. And what I'm going to get with that is you just get a few bigger spritzes. So it's just going to help to give us a little bit of visual texture going on there in the background. And as I said, it is water reactive. So if you've got little puddles, it is going to cause your ink to run a little bit. And that is perfectly fine. It doesn't matter. So we're just going to leave that just for a few seconds. We don't need to leave it for too long. I'm just going to grab a little piece of paper towel. Of course, you can just use a cloth, whatever you have. Leave it for a few seconds, and then I'm just going to dab off. Okay, and I've given it a time to start to react, which is cool. And now I'm just dabbing off. And then what you're going to get, you can kind of see, you get this visual texture going on in the background so that it's not solid. Okay. So I'm just going to give that a quick dry with the heat tool just to make sure it's completely dry, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so we have got that one dry. What I am going to do, I am now going to glue this down onto my second piece of white cardstock. So this is the piece which is 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. I'm going to glue it down now just so that it gives it a chance to dry while I am working on other parts of the card. So I like to give things a chance to dry naturally if I can. So by doing this now, I can leave that and put it to one side, and then hopefully when we get to work on it, it will be nice and dry and secure. So just going to glue that, and I'm just using white glue. You could, if you wanted to, mount that up onto 3D foam. I've not in this case. So I've got that mounted onto that white piece of card. I'm not going to mount it yet onto the black piece because I want to add my splatter before I mount it onto the black. So I'm going to put that to one side and I'm going to leave that to dry. So we'll put that over there. Now what we want to do next is we are going to create our painted background for our flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm bringing in my sheet of A4 card. Now the amount that I've got on here, I do not need to paint the whole card. I'm going to paint, I'll probably paint half of it. And all I'm going to do with that is I'm going to grab my two colours. I'm going to put some out onto my craft mat, my paint palette, and I'm going to use a brush for this. So I'm just using a flat brush. Now sometimes I paint with my fingers and do this. To be quite honest, for this it doesn't really matter. You just want to get the paint down. It doesn't matter whether you do it with your fingers or whether you do it with a brush. You just want to get the paint down on your card. Okay, now because these are translucent paints, but because I am using them on white cardstock, you're still going to get that vibrancy of colour. What tends to happen with translucents is when you're going over darker colours that actually it makes a difference. Okay, so you can see I'm just going in all directions, and you can put this on any way you like. You can do it with a sponge, you can do it with your fingers, you can do it with a brayer. It's just a case of getting this mix of colours. You don't want any white spaces in between. So I'm just going to go backwards and forwards with the two colours and create this kind of vibrant background. And it's just going to mean that when I stamp my flowers over the top of it, we're going to get a mix. We'll get a mix of those colours going on. So I'm just going to use it all up. Use up what I've got on the mat. Now, if I wasn't doing this as a tutorial, I would paint the whole page so that I have some to use at a later date. I like to have painted card ready painted, ready to go. So I usually have something painted up. So I'm just going to get that dry. I'll do that off camera. I'll get that dry, and then we're going to come back and add our stamping. Okay, so we've got that nice and dry. That is now ready to stamp on. You do need to make sure that your paint is 100% dry. You know, it needs to be completely dry. All that will happen is if you try and stamp on top of that, your stamp will stick to the paint and it will rip your paper. So you do need to make sure that that is completely dry. So what we're going to do now, we're going to add our stamping. So for this one, for the orange flowers, I have used stamp set TS058. Now, excuse the fact yours might look a little bit different because yours might be coloured. These were my initial stamp sheets before they were coloured in. So TS058, we're going to be using the large 6-pointed flower, and we're going to be using the smaller 6-pointed flower. And I'm also going to add, and I'll stamp this on the same page, I've got some little black and white flowers. So I've taken these from, this is from TS059, which is the B stamp set. And I'm actually going to be stamping this hexagon. So if you see this hexagon here is the one that I've used to create these small flowers. Of course, if you've not got this set and you have another set which has a small flower, then you can use that. It is not essential. Okay, so, and I'll stamp these at the same time. I might as well stamp them onto my white portion of my card. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stamp my large flower. Now you can use archival ink, you can use VersaFine, you can use any black ink pad that you've got to do this. I'm just using, I think I put archival on the list. I'm using my VersaFine only because my archival is not inked up, because I'm not that organised. So I'm going to stamp this large one 2 times. I only need this one twice. And then I'm going to stamp my smaller one once. And then these will be cut out. So let's do this one. And you can see by doing this with the paint in the background, all we're doing, it just means we're creating a multicoloured flower without, you know, it's got 2 different shades going on without us actually having to colour it that way. So, and then I'm just going to do one of the small ones. I only need one of those, which is fine. And then I'm going to stamp 3 of that. In fact, do you know what? I'm going to do 4 of that small hexagon on this one. I'm going to do 4, I think, and I'm going to do that on the white side. So we'll have 4 to cut out. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 4 of those ready to cut to go onto our card. So I'm just going to put my stamp sets out of the way. I've also stamped the quote from the artistic stamper Positive Vibes number 8. Positive Vibes number 8. So, and this is the one that I've stamped, which is "You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think," from A.A. Milne. Now, I'd already pre-stamped that, but obviously you can stamp that onto this piece of card as well. So that gives us our pieces that we need to cut out. Now I'm going to give this just a quick dry, and the reason I'm going to give it a quick dry, this is dry already because it's stamped onto virgin card. What you find is if you stamp over paint, it does take a little bit longer to dry, so it is advisable to just give it a little blast with your heat dryer just to make sure that it is ready to go. Perfect, so they're nice and dry. So I'm just going to grab my scissors and we are going to cut these out. Now I tend to, I'm a bit lazy. I'm not really a fussy cutter. I don't stress too much because I will add a little bit of ink around the edges. I don't worry too much if my cutting out is not perfect. So I like to cut everything into smaller pieces first. I find it much easier to cut out. So we will get those done. We'll put our painted card to one side because you could use that for another project in the future. So I'm just going to go in. As I said, I'm not going to worry too much if my cutting out is not perfect, because what I will do once I've cut, I will ink the edges. And by inking the edges, all I'll do is just get rid of any rough edges where I've cut out. So I don't stress too much. So let's cut that around. And because you know that you're going to disguise any rough edges, it just means you can go a little bit faster. I really am not a fussy cutter. I need to get it done as quick as possible. And always when you're cutting as well, move your paper rather than your scissors, and you'll find you can cut out a lot quicker. Of course, if you were going to do this as a journal page and you were going to make it a little bit bigger, then of course you would want to increase the amount of flowers that you stamp. So you may well do a full A4 page with your orange paint, just to make sure that you have, you know, that you have enough. So this is the last of the orange flowers. As I said, if you do not have the hexagon set with the bee, then just find another small flower. You could even maybe stamp this one again in black and white. Would work. You just want something a little bit smaller that you can have in the black and white. So that's my 3 coloured flowers. So what I'm going to do on these ones is I'm just going to cut out the little flower. So I'm going to cut everything else away. So I'm just going to go in. I find it easier to go in one direction first. And we just want to be left with that little daisy type flower in the middle. So let's come back in. It just gives us a little, it's just a little detail in black and white. I like to add black and white to my cards and my journal pages. It's something I do quite a lot because I use quite a lot of colour and quite a mix of colours. I always find black and white always stands out against whatever background you've got going on. Of course, you don't have to. You could colour them in if you wanted to. Maybe in a yellow or something like that, just to make them stand out a little bit. You can cut these out. Again, you can cut them out quite quickly. I did 3 on the original. I'm going to do 4 on this one. Sometimes you kind of look afterwards and think, oh, there's a gap there. That could have done with, you know, that could have done with an extra flower. So that's what we're going to do. So I hope that you are enjoying the day today. I'm sure you are. Okay, so one more. Almost there, it doesn't take very long. There we go. Let's put all that to one side. So we've got those cut out. I'm just going to cut my quote into strips. I like to cut them up. Let's go back that way. But if you prefer to have them just as a block, of course you can. I do tend to cut mine up. So I'm going to cut those 2 into strips. So the first 2 lines I'm cutting into strips. I'm just looking at what I did on the original. So my first 2 are in strips, and then this one I'm going to cut down into a couple of pieces. So I'm going to cut that down. Let's just cut that across. It's a little bit wonky. Of course, you could do this with a trimmer if you prefer. And I'm going to cut that down in between, so and smarter than you think. And then I'll cut the name out. That's optional. You can put it on there, you can leave it out. I like to include it. So I now have all my pieces that I need. I'm just going to go in very quickly with a black ink pad and I'm just going to ink around the edges. And as I said, what that's going to do is if I've got any rough edges or any white core of card, depending on how thick the card is that you're using, because obviously some cardstock is thicker than others. I'm using a 240 GSM from Paperartsy, smoothie card. It's very good for painting on, very good for stamping on top of. So I'm just going to add some black ink around the edge, and as I said, it disguises all my sins when it's come to cutting out. As I said, I'm not a fussy cutter. I tend to go very, very fast. And I quite like adding that black shadow around the edge anyway. Am I going to do it with these ones? Do you know what? I'm not going to do it with those, but I am going to edge. I am going to edge my quotes as well. Let's just go along the edges, just makes them stand out a little bit more on your card. And I'm not going to do those. You could edge your white ones if you want to, but I'm not going to do that. So we've got all of our pieces that we need. I'm going to bring my card back in. So this is now dry, which is good. So what I'm going to do, one of the large flowers, so one of the large flowers I am going to cut in half, and I'm going to cut it, I'm not going to cut it this way. I want to cut between the petals so that I get two halves. Okay, so we've got two halves going on, so that way I can have one half coming off of the bottom edge, I can have one half coming off of the side edge. Okay, then this one is going to go on top, and I'm going to bring that, I'll bring it in a little bit so that this comes into the corner. So my idea is that it will come into the corner like that, and then this one I'm going to raise up on to 3D foam. So I'm going to glue these ones down first, and then I'm going to raise the other one up onto foam. So I'm just using tacky glue, nothing special, just a white tacky glue. So let's put that one on. Go right to the edge of that coloured piece of card. Next one, so I'm going quite close. And then the small one is going to go over the top, and I'm just going to glue that one down. So that's going to go into that corner between those two. So I'm going to do it like that, and then I'm just going to snip off. Once I've got that on there, I can just go in and just snip across. Once I know where that's going, don't knock it though. Once I know where that is going to sit, I'm just going to snip off the edge. I'm not worried that there's a little gap in the corner. Okay. And then I'm just going to use some foam tape, foam pads, whatever you've got. And I'm going to add that to my large flower. So I'm only going in the centre of that. You don't need to put the foam tape all over. Of course, you could just glue it down. And then I'm just going to come in, and I'm bringing that over so that I'm disguising some of those gaps in between. So just play around. That's fine. You can see that's coming away from the card a little bit, which is cool. So what I'm going to do now is with my smaller flowers, I'm going to do these with glue. Again, you could do these with foam tape if you wanted to. I'm just going to glue. I'm going to have one in the centre. And it just makes it pop a little bit. I like it because it makes it pop out. And then I'm going to put a few around the card. So let's have, I'm going to have one, kind of following what I did before. So I'm going to have one, it's going to come under there a little bit. Let's put that one there. I'm going to have one up here. And what I didn't do last time, but I am going to do this time, is I'm going to put one down at the bottom as well. So I'm going to add one. Oh, don't stick it to you under paper. I'm going to add one down here as well this time, which I didn't do last time. But there we go. Quote can go down. No, it can't. Don't put your quote down yet. Don't do what I do. So before I put the quote down, what I want to do is add a little bit of gold splatter. I want to do that obviously before I put the quote down because I don't want it to splatter over my my writing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a tiny bit of gold paint to my packaging that I'm using as my mat. I'm going to grab my paintbrush. So I'm just going to use the same paintbrush. You can use whatever you want, whichever one. I just grab whatever I've got to hand. So what I've done is loaded up my brush with water and I'll mix it up with the paint. Now you always know if your paint is ready to splatter because you should be able to load up your brush. You should be able to just tap, and when you tap, your paint should just tap off. You shouldn't need to throw your brush around the room. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over and add some splatter. You can add, I like to do it all over. You can add as little or as much as you like. I like to have quite a lot. If you don't like to have any, leave it out. Okay, so let's put that back in the water pot. So what I want to do, I'm going to get that dried because obviously I can't stick down my quote unless that's dry. So I'm going to do that and then I will come back. Okay, so our gold paint is dry, so it's time to put our quote on. So let's go in there. So again, you can do this with 3D foam if you want to. I am just doing it with tacky glue. Let's go in there. So let's move that one up just a tiny bit. This is why I cut this one, so that it would fit down the side. Now I'm going to leave, because I put that little flower there, I'm going to leave off. I'm going to leave this little bit off, which is the author's name. So that's cool, that's ready to go. So what we want to do now is we're going to bring in our black piece of card. Now you can either glue this down or you can do this on 3D foam. Now I glued it last time, I think I'm going to do it on foam this time, but the option is there. You can literally do either. Do whatever you like, whatever suits you. I think I'm going to do it for quickness, and because I know that it will dry a little bit quicker, I'm going to do it on foam this time. And we're going to add this, and then we've literally just got a little bit of pen work to do, not very much, just a small detail. This is very sticky stuff. Okay, so let's get this stuck down. Let's make sure it's nice and central. Hopefully that is. And then what I'm going to do, I am going to take a black pen just to add a little bit of detail, and I'm just going to add a black stitched edge. So I'm just going to go all the way around. You don't have to do that. I just think it adds a nice contrast on that white around the edge and ties in with the black. So we just go all the way around, and I'm just using a black gel pen, but you can use whatever you have. So nearly there. And as I said, this measures the black card on this measures 5 by 5 inches. So this could be mounted on a 5 by 5 card, and obviously that would go right to the very edge, or you could mount it onto a 6 by 6 card, and if you did that, you would give yourself a white border around the edge of the card. I very often make things like this, and then I will add them to cards afterwards as and when I need them. Sometimes I'll make them without any quotes on, and then I can add them to cards as and when I need and put a sentiment on there. So you could just have a few things made up in advance ready to go and add your sentiment when you are ready. So that is my finished card. As I said, that can be mounted up. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I did do a second one just to show you using the same techniques or similar techniques, so I'll bring that in. So that's the one that we've done today. This was the second one that I did. So and I did the same thing. It's the same stencil in the background. I just used 2 different shades of greens. So and what I did on that one was I went over with the lightest green first, and then I just went in and around the centre of the hexagons, I went in with the darker green to create a different kind of shadow, if you like, different kind of texture. I used the B stamp from the same set, so the same set as we've used for the hexagons, the little flowers, which is TS059, and I've used a sentiment from the same stamp set, which is Positive Vibes 8. So that was Don't Let Yesterday Take Up Too Much of Today. So, and all I did with that, I just used some coloured pens, so just some regular felt tip pens, and just added a little bit of colour to my B when I cut it out. So hopefully you will give it a go. Hopefully you've enjoyed my tutorial, and I hope that you are enjoying your day. So I hope to see you very, very soon. Bye bye.